Okay, fab. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's Suicide Prevention Day today. So we are going to go through the role of the workplace in suicide prevention. My name's Stacey, and I'm going to take you through this conversation around suicide and the workplace. So suicide is a really deep and personal issue, but it is also a workplace issue. And in this session, we're going to explore why workplaces matter in suicide prevention and how employers can create environments where people feel safe to seek help. As you may be aware, I work for Mind in Mid Hearts. We're your local mental health charity. We're dedicated to improving mental well-being in our community. So we are affiliated with National Mind, but we're a charity in our own right. National Mind do a lot of raising awareness around mental health and the challenges people might face. But here at Mind in Mid Hearts, we actually put on services in our local area. So that could be anything from workplace well-being to counselling and peer support groups, and we run a variety of different services. If you're interested in finding out more about us, what we do, then please do feel free to scan the QR code on the screen or follow us on social media or check out our website. Just a little housekeeping before we begin. Aim to finish today's session at 12:45. That includes some time for Q&A at the end of the session. If you could just keep yourselves on mute until the Q&A at the end of the session, that would be really appreciated. This session is being recorded, but I will stop the recording before the Q&A. Just a little trigger warning as well. We will be talking about suicide in some detail today, and that can feel quite heavy sometimes. So please just make sure that you're looking after yourselves during today's session and afterwards as well. So if you're able to take a break, go for a walk, do something to really take care of yourselves, I invite you to do that. By the end of this webinar, I'm hoping that you will understand the scope and complexity of suicide. So you'll be able to recognise the prevalence and risk factors associated with suicide in working age populations. You'll also be able to recognise potential warning signs and understand appropriate ways to respond in a workplace setting. You'll understand your legal and ethical duty of care, know what's required of employees under the health and safety and employment law, and also identify practical organisational strategies to reduce suicide risk. That includes learning how to mitigate risk through culture, line manager training, anti-bullying frameworks, and early intervention systems. Also promote protective factors in your workplace, understand how to create environments that reduce isolation and support mental well-being long term. Okay, so let's begin with why this matters. Well, in 2023, there were 5,656 suicides registered in England and Wales, and more than 4,500 of these suicides were people of working age, so that's between the ages of 20 and 64. In Hertfordshire alone, in 2021 and 2022, there were 264 deaths included in the suicide audit, and of these, 45.1% of these people were identified as in employment. We know that 75% of suicides are by men, and suicide remains the leading cause of death for men under 50. Now, Mind did a big report called the Attitudes in Mental Health report. And that shows us that actually stigma around suicide and mental health is actually getting worse, making it harder for people to reach out. But in Hertfordshire, just in Hertfordshire, 36.7% of people who died by suicide were known to a mental health service at the time of death. And 16% were known to have discussed mental health issues with a member of their GP practice in the 4 weeks leading up to their death. So this tells us that despite the fact that stigma is getting worse, people are looking for help and support. So this means that the role of employers has never been more critical. A workplace can either be a lifeline, so a place where someone finds support and hope, or it can be a space where silence and stigma push them further into isolation. So that's why this matters. This is why suicide is a workplace issue. Most of us spend a huge part of our lives at work, and at best, it provides structure, purpose, and a sense of identity. It can also give us a sense of belonging. It can offer us opportunities for growth and contribute positively to our mental health. A supportive network at work can help people feel valued and connected and resilient. But on the flip side, work can also be a source of distress. Toxic cultures, unrealistic expectations, job insecurity, bullying, and poor management can all damage our mental well-being. So stress and burnout and feeling isolated, and sometimes we're doing that silently, and that can increase the risk of serious mental health issues, including suicidal thoughts and behaviours. So we'll come on to it in more detail in a moment, but employers do have a legal duty to protect both the physical and psychological well-being of their people. But beyond the law, there is a moral duty as well. We all have mental health, and we don't just leave it at home. The workplace isn't just a physical space, it's part of our lives. Like we said a moment ago, we spend so much time here. And suicide prevention is not about turning managers into counsellors. It's about creating environments where people feel safe, they feel supported, and they feel able to seek support without stigma. As I said before, suicide is complex and it is never caused by a single factor. There are certain groups that are higher at risk. So middle-aged men, particularly those between 45 and 49, they have the highest suicide rates. Low-skilled male workers, so people, especially like the construction field, they face a risk nearly 3 times higher than the average person. And among women, nurses and carers are disproportionately affected. It's also important to know that a past attempt of suicide is the strongest predictor of a future suicide. So risk is also elevated by impulsivity, alcohol, drug misuse, and understanding these risk groups can help employers design prevention strategies that meet real needs of their people. So moving on to warning signs, it's really important that everyone knows the potential warning signs of someone struggling with their mental health or considering suicide. And there are 4 key areas to look out for. The first is behaviour. So that can be things like becoming withdrawn, maybe there's a sudden decline in performance, an increase in irritability or recklessness, increased use of alcohol or drugs, giving away possessions, or making final arrangements as well would be a red flag. Conversational. So things you're looking out for that people might say. They might start talking about hopelessness. They might talk about death more often. They might refer to themselves as being a burden, or talking as if they have no future. Physical signs can include things like fatigue, sleep issues, mood swings, changing weight, whether that's putting on weight or losing weight, or eating habits. Emotional signs are quite tricky because people can experience a whole range of different emotions, not just typically sad and feeling hopeless. We also see people who start to feel relieved and calm because they've made plans to end what they're going through. So these are just a few examples, and not everyone will show these signs. Some people are really good at hiding their struggles, and that's why relationships and trust and open conversations, especially in the workplace, matter so much. Going back to our legal and ethical duty of care in the workplace, under the Health and Safety at Work Act, employers must protect people's well-being. That includes mental health. The Equality Act recognises mental health conditions as potential disabilities if they have a long-term effect on someone's day-to-day activities for over 12 months. And this may mean that you need to consider reasonable adjustments where appropriate. You might find it interesting to look at the Core versus IBC Vehicles case. Now, in this case, Mr. Core took his own life after having received an injury at work. And the courts found that the employer's negligence contributed to the employee's suicide. So this just sets a clear precedent that suicide prevention is a duty, not an option. So you might find it interesting to look into that. Alongside our legal obligations, there is an ethical responsibility to create workspaces free from bullying, harassment and discrimination as well. And if we look at this image, it's basically demonstrating to us that we need to be mindful of mental health and well-being for every person at every level, at every point. We don't want to wait until people are at the point where they're struggling with their mental health and considering suicide before we start looking after them. So you see at the top of the image there, at the top of the triangle, we have support for all employees to thrive. So that's whether they've disclosed a mental illness or not. That's ensuring things that like people having a good work-life balance, making sure they're taking breaks, that they have equal opportunities and so on. And then underneath that, we have targeted support for those who are struggling or ill. That's where we consider any reasonable adjustments where necessary. So how do we know that we have a culture needing care at work? What are the warning signs that our company culture isn't quite where we'd like it to be and we need to implement some changes? High turnover and absenteeism, that's a really big indicator, and usually, something that we can see in numbers. This usually indicates that there's some kind of underlying dissatisfaction or an unsuitable working environment. So that's something to look out for. You can also look out for a poor work-life balance and an always-on culture. So if you notice that your employees aren't properly taking their breaks and they're eating their lunch at their desks frequently, maybe they are not using their annual leave, or they're sending late night emails or logging in early, it can be a sign that the work-life balance at the company is not where it should be. Disengagement. So if that's employees showing a lack of enthusiasm, not coming up with as many ideas, not being as creative as they were before, or just doing the bare minimum, this can be an indication of a disconnect from their work or from the company. Increased errors and lower quality of work. So like if there's a rise in mistakes, missed deadlines, or a general dip in output, can often stem from stress, or overload, or that disengagement that we were talking about, and it can really affect people's well-being. Interpersonal conflicts at work. So if you're noticing more frequent disagreements within teams, maybe some tension, or teams struggling to collaborate, or perhaps within teams or across departments, that is a sign that the sense of community has started to diminish. When people are stressed, there's a culture of poor communication, that can indicate that there's a lack of support or psychological safety at work. Poor morale and negative talk, so like a general sense of pessimism, people complaining quite a lot or feeling cynical, that can signal widespread dissatisfaction across the company and a lack in the belief in the company's direction. Frequent confusion or misinformation. So employees often, if they're unclear on tasks or company decisions, leading to repeated questions or spread of rumors even, this can point to poor communication and transparency from leadership, which fosters this distrust and inefficiency. So these are the kind of things that we want to look out for. And so what can organizations actually do? So I've got a few proactive strategies that are about making help available before a crisis happens. So firstly, making sure that mental health is embedded in your core business strategies. That's creating a mentally healthy work environment, and that should be a priority for companies, not an afterthought. You might want to think about training, so training line managers and mental health peer supporters to notice changes in staff so that they can respond appropriately. And that might be training on how to respond appropriately. Bullying and harassment can have huge impact on people's mental health and can contribute to people feeling like they can't speak out about how they're feeling. And so it's really important for companies to show that they have a zero tolerance for any of this kind of behaviour. Stress risk assessments. So organisations should carry out stress risk assessments just like you would any other risk assessment. You're essentially using the health and safety executive standards to identify and manage sources of stress within the company. And there are 6 key areas to the HSE standards that are associated with poor health, lower productivity, and increased accidents and sickness absence rates. Provide access to employee assistance programs. That might look like counselling, or you might signpost to specialist services. This could also include having a peer support program in place. So sometimes people don't necessarily want to talk about their manager, about their struggles. So it can be helpful to have specific mental health champions who promote well-being at every level. They can also provide resources and other support sources of support for those who need it. It's essential that organisations create safe spaces for people to disclose mental health problems without stigma. Spaces where employees feel they will be listened to and respected, allow them to seek the support that they need before they get ill to a point where they need that additional support. So we really need to normalise conversations about mental health and suicide and not avoid them. And this could be just in day-to-day conversations, or it could be regular one-to-one check-ins. This also includes being mindful of the language that we use. The way that we talk about mental health and suicide has an impact on how we feel. And that's language that we use all the time, not necessarily in those one-to-one catch-ups. You don't want to be overheard in a conversation with a different colleague using language that's undesirable, because someone might overhear you, and therefore that creates that distrust between leaders and employees. Senior leaders should role model well-being and prioritizing well-being day to day. So what seems like small self-care practices have actually got a really big impact on how staff perceive wellness within the workplace. So this can just include things like making sure you as managers are taking your breaks, that you're setting boundaries, and that you're being open about the challenges that you're facing. Make sure that that you have policies and that they're adaptable and inclusive. And remember that policies can empower managers too. So make sure that you support managers in understanding the policies that you have in place. And remember that a compassionate culture sends the message that you matter and it is safe to speak up. That's really important. Okay, so how to respond to a suicide risk? If you are concerned about someone, the first step is to notice changes and start a conversation. And you can ask directly, are you having thoughts of suicide? And I know that this can feel quite difficult and it can feel quite uncomfortable, but research shows that asking directly does not put the idea in someone's head. It actually often comes as a relief to be asked. Listen with empathy and avoid judgment. Encourage people to seek professional help, such as contacting their GP. There are also other services that you can recommend they call, like the Samaritans or the Nightlight Crisis Cafe. But if there is an immediate risk, then call 999 and don't leave that person on their own. Your role is not to fix everything, and you can't fix that person, but it's your role to connect them to the right support. Now, when we talk about suicide prevention, we often focus on early intervention and awareness and support, like we have done so far today. But if a suicide does occur, how an organisation responds is critical, and this is called postvention. This is basically the support and strategies that you put in place after a suicide occurs. It's about helping people affected, whether that's family and friends or colleagues. Now, this might feel like it's something that can wait, and it might get put to the bottom of your to-do list, but it is really important that employers have a clear plan in place before this situation occurs. Having something in place allows you to react and communicate quickly and efficiently and avoid sort of becoming in that reactive state. So we want to offer compassionate support to staff who have been affected as quickly as possible. Manage communications with care and sensitivity. Recognize that people bereaved by suicide are themselves at higher risk, but well-handled postvention reduces trauma and prevents further harm. So by embedding postvention into our mental health strategies, we create a culture of care that extends beyond prevention, one that acknowledges loss and healing and helps us to build resilience. So protective factors are resources and support that reduce the chance of someone becoming ill. They help people to cope and recover quickly and become more resilient. So hopefully allowing them to cope and recover before getting to a crisis point. As we mentioned earlier, the workplace can be a big part of our identity, and it can help us to feel valued and like we belong to something bigger. This quite often comes from things like strong social connections and supportive workplace relationships, inclusion and diversity, access to hobbies and interests as well. So employers can encourage these things by considering inclusion and diversity, creating peer support networks, and implementing an employee assistance program. You could also encourage hobbies and interests. Like, for example, you could create an after work football team or a lunchtime book club. And that's something that you can speak to your staff about, like, what do they need? It's also really good to encourage further learning where possible. Learning gives us a sense of self-worth and makes us feel good about ourselves. We've mentioned before, really important to have those open conversations and promote well-being in our long-term strategies. Okay, fab. So I just want to move on to our services here at Mind in Mid Hearts. We offer a range of training and services that can aid your journey to an inclusive, mentally healthy work environment. Here at Mind in Mid Hearts, we are made up of mental health practitioners and experts. Many of us have lived experience perspective as well that we can bring to the sessions. So I'll just start by going through our mental health peer supporter training program that's available. Now, what mental health peer supporters are, they're dedicated people within your company that promote mental health, and they would be able to signpost people to relevant sources of support. And what that looks like in your company can be different company to company. So it's really good to have a plan of what you think and what your staff think would be helpful within your work environment. Now, our training gives a more in-depth understanding of mental health and the factors that affect well-being, how to spot the signs of emotional distress and poor mental health, and really give those people that you've chosen the confidence to step in and offer the most appropriate support. Now, we have two options. We have open courses. Now, these are online. They are over 2 sessions. We actually have a course coming up on the 16th and 17th. So if this is something that you are interested in, you can book now for those next dates that are available. And this is really good if you are just intending to send 1 or 2 or 3 people on training. It gives them a chance to interact with people from across different organizations, which is really helpful to kind of get a feel for what other organizations do. If you are interested in booking that now, you can book via that QR code on the screen, or you can contact us after today's session. Alternatively, we do offer that training in-house, and this is best if you have more people. We can have up to 16 people on that course, and we can do that online or in person, and we can be flexible with dates and times. So that's really good. If you've got more people, it allows those people to build relationships with each other within your company, and we can tailor that to your company's needs. So, for example, if we have examples or case studies, then we can use that as discussed with you to what's relevant to your company. We also offer ongoing support for peer supporters. Now, how that looks is up to you, and that's something that we can discuss. It might be that your peer supporters come along to one of our networking events specifically designed for peer supporters, or it might be that we offer them drop-in sessions or other ways of supporting them are available as well. Whichever option you choose, the learning is the same, and each participant receives a certificate and a workbook, and so that's your options there for peer support training. We do also have other training available. We have our suicide awareness training. What we've gone through today has been a really quick overview about suicide. This course goes into more detail, including going into the risks and the protective factors and how to respond to someone who may be at risk of suicide. We do also offer post-suicide support training. So that gives you the knowledge and practical skills to support people affected by suicide. So we'll explore what the impact that suicide has on you as an individual or your workforce, and how to put compassionate support systems in place. Alongside our training, we do also offer support services. So we have that post-bereavement and suicide support in the workplace, and these are tailored sessions offering a holistic approach to offer suicide after a death or a suicide. We can discuss in more detail what that looks like for you. We do also offer counselling, which is a safe space to explore big feelings, or drop-in sessions, which are much shorter. They are usually around 15 to 20-minute sessions to receive advice or sources of support. Both of those can be delivered in person or online, and that's something for you to consider, and we can discuss your details, your needs in more detail. But what I would just like to finish on today is things that you can do today. So some call to actions. Today is just the starting point, not the end. So I really encourage you to consider your business's training needs. So today's session, like I say, it's just been an overview, and you may need to sign up for deeper training workshops, however that looks. Perhaps you need to train your line managers to equip them with the skills for supportive conversations. Or maybe you need to implement peer support. How do you do that? Do you need training for that? You should go away and review your organization's suicide prevention and wellbeing strategy. And what better day to do that than World Suicide Prevention Day? Just ensuring that you're putting people at the heart of your organization. You could also consider partnering with us for consultancy and long-term support, and consider suicide prevention requires sustained commitment, not just one-off events. So really important to incorporate that into your strategy. But remember, whatever it is you do today, small changes can spark big results. And if you need any help going through what your business requires, then please do contact us. So thank you so much for listening to me. We do still have just over 5 minutes for Q&A. So I am going to stop the recording. Bear with me one moment. Where do I do that? Okay, so the recording has been stopped.